So the developed world has a problem. It isn't producing enough babies to sustain its workforce, and certainly not enough to sustain the extraordinary growth we've had in the past. And this is going to result in a lot of economic and political and existential problems for our species. So I want to answer the question here, why don't people want babies? And the answer is really simple. They don't want babies because it doesn't make economic sense. These creatures are extraordinarily expensive. It costs parents $250,000 or $500,000 to raise a child in America, and that's extraordinarily expensive. It's expensive not only in the cost, but in the losses of opportunity, things you can't do, and in the enormous risks that you take when you have a child. So people aren't having babies because it costs too much. Simple as that. So I want to talk about these costs, what these economic costs are, and the whole economic picture of baby making. People do things for reasons other than money. But if it's going to cost too much, if it's going to cost $1 million or $250,000, well, that's a huge disincentive to doing it. And if you do have a baby, you're going to have one or two. You will have satiated your emotional needs with one or two, and you're not going to go on to 3 or 4, which is what we really need. So what are the economics of baby making? It's first of all, who benefits from baby making? It's certainly not the parents. You spend all this money on the children, and economically at least, you don't get any rewards. You spend $250,000, but you don't get anything out of it. You get some emotional satisfaction if they turn out well. You get a lot of frustration if they don't turn out well. But economically, it's a loss leader for you. Who is it that benefits from baby making? Well, it's the government and it's society, because what you're really generating in economic terms is when you generate a baby, you're generating a future taxpayer. Someone who's going to help sustain the government by going to work and paying taxes. And you're producing, if you're lucky, someone who contributes to society. Yet society and the government are doing nothing to pay you back, nothing to pay you. It's a little like running a tree farm, and you plant some trees and you tend to them for 30 years, and then someone else comes along and cuts down the tree, and you haven't got anything for all of your work. And that's what baby making essentially is. So if we want to encourage baby making in the future, we have to make it economic, if not rewarding, at least not so economically costly in the end. You shouldn't have to lay out $250,000 for someone else's benefit. Now, if we imagine that children are a factory product, they're not a factory product, but let's imagine that they're just a product that we're producing. If we're running this factory is called the family. The job of the factory family is to produce children. And if you're a factory manager, you're concerned about two kinds of costs. One kind of cost is called fixed costs. Those are the costs of building the factory and maintaining the factory. In the case of a family, the fixed costs are the home that you live in and the utilities that you have to pay before you even have a child. Then when you do have a child, you've got to go out and you've got to buy stuff for that child. And that gets into what we call a marginal cost. So a factory has two costs. It has fixed costs and marginal costs. Marginal costs are the cost for every product produced by the factory once you've paid your fixed costs. So if you have a car factory, you've got to build the car factory, you've got to put machinery in the car factory. That's the fixed cost. The marginal cost is the cost of the raw materials that go into the car and the parts you have to buy for the car and the various the labor that goes into the car. Those are your marginal expenses. And every business manager, every factory manager is concerned with reducing their marginal costs. There's not a lot you can do about the fixed costs, but you can reduce the marginal costs so they are less, and then you can produce more at lower cost. Baby making, it's intensive both in fixed costs and in marginal costs. The funny thing about the marginal costs is they are different for each child. Even within your own family, each child is imposing different marginal costs. And the child with the greatest marginal cost is the firstborn. Because for the firstborn, you have to buy all the baby stuff. You have to buy the cribs and the baby clothes, and you have to have established this whole environment for the baby. And you're going to spend a lot of time on this baby because it's the first time you've done it, and you want to read all the baby making books, how to raise your baby books, and watch all the videos. And all of this it greatly increases the marginal cost, or the per child cost of that first infant. After that, when you have your second, third, and fourth baby, those costs go down. Because, for example, for the second baby, you don't necessarily have to buy a new house. You can use the house that you already have. You don't have to buy the crib or the baby clothes because you already have those from the first baby. So the marginal costs for the second baby have gone down. They've also gone down in terms of you learning what is going on. You're not so tense with the second baby because you've learned how things work, and you've come up with techniques, and your parenting has gotten more efficient. And it gets more efficient still when you get into your third and your fourth baby. Your fourth baby is just no problem at all because you've already figured things out. And I might point out that just because you're the fourth child and the marginal costs are low doesn't mean you're getting a defective childhood. You could get just as warm and just as successful a childhood as the firstborn gets, because the fourthborn has all these rich experiences, and the thirdborn has both older siblings to look after him and younger siblings that he or she can look after. So it's not the fact that marginal cost brings down the quality of parenting. It's just that the more you do it, the more efficient you get, and the more you don't have to repeat things like buying new cribs. So this factory product being children, the marginal cost goes down, down, down with each child. So obviously a bigger family is a more efficient unit per child than a small family is. The trouble is, what happens when you get to 2 or 3 or 4 babies, when your marginal cost has now gone down? Well, that's when parents stop, because the cost is still huge for all these children. You got to put them through college and raise them for the next 20 years. So you're going to stop at some point. It's probably going to be at 2 kids, could be at 3. Very few people go to 4 in this day and age, but they stop. And what that means in factory terms is that now you've already got down to your minimal marginal cost, and then you quit, and you've lost all those gains that you have you've accumulated by quitting. So if this were a factory and you've got up to 4 kids and you've got everything running smoothly and your marginal costs are low, you're just going to keep doing it forever. And that's what parents in the current world can't do, because they run out of steam. That's why I'm proposing this, what I call this modular family, which I talked about in a previous video. Let's imagine a family of 9 children. And once you reach 9, you stay at 9 forever. Because as children age out of the system, they turn 18, they take larger roles in the community, then you bring in a new baby. Let's talk later about where the babies come from, but you bring in a new baby into this 9-person family, and you maintain a constant level of production. And your production with 9 kids is always going to be low, because you've already bought all the equipment that you need for these children. They just hand clothes down to each other. You've got a lot of interactions within the children, so that to a large extent the older children take care of younger children. So you've got very low marginal costs. The trouble is, it doesn't really fit with the nuclear family that we know now, which is two parents and a bunch of kids. They can't handle it, but a larger community might be able to handle it. A larger community of adults who join forces could be able to support a 9-child family. And that's what we'll talk about in future videos. What is the adult support structure that surrounds this modular family? And where do the babies come from? So I told you the stork brought the babies. So every 2 years or every year, the stork brings a new baby and everybody's overjoyed. Where does that stork come from? Because obviously it has to come from a human female. That's the only way we know how to make babies. But how does this integrate with a family? Because you can't just rip a child away from its mother. That's inhumane, and it's not the way things work. When a woman has a baby, she wants to keep it. She wants to hold it close, and that's entirely natural, and it's not necessarily inconsistent with this 9-person family. So I'm going to talk about this in the future, but in the meantime, you want to think about the economics of baby making, and it's really obvious why we can't make enough babies right now. It's just too damn expensive. So I'm in a abandoned grain silo in Kansas someplace. Let's explore a little. Oh, this is the, let's see, grain silo. Goes way, way, way up. It goes way up. What's in here? Can't see a damn thing. Up there are the railroad tracks, and over there is the place where you load and unload the trucks. Looks like it hasn't been used in 30 years or so.